6 months after the elegant wedding, the Adeni estate was alive with joy, purpose, and new beginnings. Tunde and Zainab had become the couple everyone admired, co-running the family foundation, making public appearances, and managing the billion-dollar conglomerate with grace. Veronica, having reclaimed her rightful place in the mansion, had taken a quieter role, focusing on her grandchildren and mentoring young women. But beneath the surface of luxury, perfection, and progress, something was festering. It began with a letter. One afternoon, while sorting through old business files in the private study, Zainab found an unmarked envelope tucked inside a book that once belonged to Tunde's late father. Inside was a handwritten message that chilled her to the bone. If you're reading this, you've married into a house of secrets. The woman who protected you was not the first to wear a mask here. Be careful, there are layers to this legacy. Zainab's heart pounded as she stared at the slanted handwriting, unsigned. She turned the envelope over, no return address, no hint of who had left it. But what disturbed her more than the message was the feeling that someone wanted her to find it. Zainab tucked the cryptic letter into her dress pocket and left the study, her mind spinning. Who would write such a message? Was it a warning, a threat, or something worse? That night she couldn't sleep. Tunde was snoring gently beside her, his arm draped across her waist, but Zainab lay wide awake, staring at the ceiling. Something about the handwriting felt oddly familiar, like a whisper from a past she hadn't fully uncovered. Just before dawn, she made a decision. She would speak to Veronica. If anyone could decipher the hidden message, it was the woman who had once worn a disguise to protect her son's future. But when Zainab found Veronica on the veranda the next morning, something strange happened. Before she could even pull out the letter, a woman appeared at the estate gate unannounced, uninvited. She was tall, wrapped in a black lace veil, with gold rings on every finger. The staff hesitated, confused by her presence. "Tell Veronica Adeniyi that Amaka has returned," the woman said in a low, chilling voice. Veronica rose slowly from her chair, her face paling. "Amaka," she whispered. Zainab turned to look at her mother-in-law, surprised to see genuine fear flicker in the woman's eyes. "Who is she?" Zainab asked. Veronica didn't answer. Instead, she walked forward, her posture rigid, as if facing a ghost from a buried past. Zainab had thought she'd married into power, into love, but now she realized she had also married into war. The entire estate froze as Amaka stepped into the mansion, her heels clicking against the marble with calculated elegance. The air felt charged, as if the very walls remembered her. Veronica's lips tightened as she walked down to meet the woman, but her regal demeanor couldn't mask the tremor in her fingers. "You should not have come back," Veronica said, her voice low and deliberate. Amaka pulled off her veil, revealing a stunning face, sharp cheekbones, honey-brown skin, and eyes like polished obsidian. "You never buried me, Veronica. You just hoped I'd disappear." Zainab, watching from the staircase, gripped the rail tighter. Tunde joined her moments later, stunned to see the woman now seated in their living room like royalty. "Mom, who is this?" he asked, confusion thick in his voice. Amaka smiled coldly. "Ask your mother, Tunde. Ask her who I was to your father. Ask her who I was before she became queen of this house." Silence followed, heavy as stone. Then Veronica spoke, each word like a blade. "She was your father's first wife, the one who tried to destroy everything we built." Gasps echoed from the staff. Zainab's knees nearly buckled. Tunde looked like the ground had split beneath him. Amaka leaned back in her seat, triumphant. "And now I'm here to collect what's mine. The will your father wrote, the one you never saw? I have a copy, and if you think this family is safe, you've grossly underestimated me." The mansion descended into chaos. Veronica, usually composed, was pacing for the first time in years. Tunde locked himself in his study. Zainab tried to remain calm, but her hands trembled as she read the faded photocopy of the will Amaka produced. It was dated 5 years before Tunde's father died, long before anyone knew of his illness. It named Amaka not only as a legal spouse, but as a trustee to a private offshore account holding $50 million. "This can't be real," Tunde muttered. "We had everything handled after the funeral. All his legal affairs. Handled by your mother, Amaka interrupted, sipping from a glass of wine like she owned the estate. But did you ever read them for yourself, Tunde? Or did you just trust her like a good little heir? The room went still. Veronica said nothing. Her silence was more dangerous than any scream. Zainab stepped between them. Even if the will is real, why come back now? Why after all this time? Amaka stood, walking slowly toward her. Because, my dear, your marriage changed everything. The company's shares I was willing to forget, they're now being passed to you. I have no issue with your love, but I will not watch what was once mine become yours. Veronica finally spoke. You don't want money, Amaka. You want revenge. Amaka smiled. I want both, and I always get what I want. As she left the room, her voice floated back like a curse. You thought the maid was the problem? Darling, that was a fairy tale. I'm the reckoning. By the next morning, Amaka had already made herself comfortable in the east wing of the mansion. Veronica wanted her gone, but legally she couldn't evict her without confronting the will in court. She's exploiting a technicality, Veronica told her lawyer, voice laced with venom. And if she gets media wind of this, but it was too late. That same afternoon, blogs across Lagos were already buzzing. Adeniyi matriarch faces secret first wife. Headlines splashed Amaka's photo beside Veronica's like a royal feud. The internet erupted with speculation. Investors began calling. Board members grew jittery. And Tunde? He shut down. But Zainab didn't. She had grown up in a quiet home, trained to stay composed. But something about Amaka's smugness set fire to her backbone. That night she entered Amaka's wing without knocking. What are you really after? She asked, standing tall. Amaka didn't even look up. She sat at a vanity, brushing her long hair slowly, a diamond-studded comb in hand. You think this is about money? She said, eyes locking with Zainab's in the mirror. I loved that man before he became Adeniyi the billionaire. I carried his first child, lost her, while your husband was still in diapers. Zainab froze. You think you're special because you passed Veronica's little maid test? Amaka whispered, voice silky. You don't know what war looks like, my dear, but you will. She set the brush down, pulled out a vial of dark liquid from her drawer, and stared at it. Every queen has her poison. Zainab left the room, chest tight, heart racing. She didn't know what was coming, but she knew one thing for sure. Amaka wasn't bluffing. One moment she was addressing the press about the Adeniyi Foundation's New Girls Scholarship Program, calm, composed, and radiant. The next, her words slurred, her knees buckled, and she crashed to the ground. Gas filled the room, cameras flashed. Tunde rushed forward, catching her just before her head hit the floor. By the time they got to the hospital, she was unconscious. The doctors ran tests. No stroke, no seizure, no trauma. But there were traces of an unidentified compound in her blood. It mimics neurological symptoms, one doctor explained, and it's not something you'd find in food. This was deliberately administered. Tunde turned pale. Veronica turned to stone. The hospital room buzzed with tension. Tunde refused to leave Zainab's side. Veronica stood at the window, jaw clenched. She's starting, she said, and she's using your wife to send a message. That night, while Zainab lay asleep, Veronica returned to the mansion alone. She marched straight to the east wing. Amaka was seated on her balcony, sipping tea under the moonlight like she was on vacation. You poisoned her, Veronica said. Amaka smiled faintly, not turning around. I warned her, queens must understand war. She knocked on my door thinking it was a game. Veronica's voice dropped to a whisper. This is not a game. Amaka finally looked at her. Then fight me properly, Veronica, not with maids in disguises. Fight me like the matriarch you pretend to be. For the first time in decades, Veronica was afraid not for herself, but for the girl she had come to love like a daughter. Zainab wasn't just fighting for her marriage now. She was fighting for her life. Veronica hadn't worn her late husband's gold lion head pendant in over 15 years. But that morning she pulled it from her private vault and clasped it around her neck. As the pendant settled against her chest, her reflection shifted from grieving mother to lioness once again. If she wants war, she said to herself, she'll get it. She didn't alert Tunde. She didn't ask the board. She called two people no one had heard her speak to in years, retired intelligence officers who owed her favors from a time when her husband had nearly been assassinated during a property war. "I need everything on Amaka before, during, and after him," she said. "I want to know what she eats, who she calls, where she hides her venom." Meanwhile, Amaka made her next move. She filed an emergency petition in court, claiming psychological trauma and wrongful exile from her marriage to the late Chief Adeniyi. She backed it with a forged medical report, claiming years of mistreatment by Veronica, the woman who replaced her. The media lapped it up. The headlines now called her the forgotten wife. Online sympathy poured in. Veronica's reputation carefully rebuilt after the Maid disguise scandal started to crack. But what Amaka didn't know was that Veronica had already secured a mole. Amaka's former housekeeper, a woman she underpaid and humiliated for years. That night, Veronica met the woman in an underground car park. "She keeps everything in the black trunk," the housekeeper whispered. "Photos, letters, secrets even she's scared of." Veronica's eyes narrowed. "Good. Then it's time we open the trunk." This wasn't a rivalry anymore. This was a resurrection. The black trunk was hidden in plain sight, tucked beneath a settee in Amaka's private wing, sealed with a combination lock disguised as an antique carving. Veronica didn't hesitate. She waited until Amaka left for her widow's rights court hearing, then entered the suite with the stealth of a ghost. The housekeeper had given her the code, 1229, the birthday of the child Amaka lost. Veronica hesitated, then entered it. Click. The lock snapped open, like it had been waiting. Inside were stacks of photos, letters, medical records, and a worn-out red diary. She flipped it open. What she read shook her to her core. December 12th, 2005. "The deal is done. He promised me the shares, but Veronica won't allow it. So I made a decision. I made him sign the offshore transfer while he was sedated. He begged me not to. I didn't care." Veronica's breath caught. More pages followed, painful admissions of blackmail, emotional manipulation, and ultimately, the truth. Amaka had forged the offshore will. Chief Adeni had intended to return to Veronica legally, but he died before he could reverse what she tricked him into signing. The final entry was a knife. "If anything ever happens to me, I've left the rest with Auntie Nene in Calabar. I don't trust anyone here." Veronica snapped photos of every page, heart pounding. She knew what had to be done, but it wasn't just about clearing her name anymore. It was about saving Tunde and Zainab from a woman who had stolen everything, and now wanted more. As she stepped out of the room, the lights flickered. Amaka stood in the doorway. "You went through my things?" she asked, voice like thunder. Veronica met her gaze without blinking. You stole my husband. I'm just reclaiming the truth." Amaka didn't scream. She didn't flinch. She simply stepped aside and let Veronica walk past, but her eyes burned like coals, and her silence was louder than 100 curses. That night, the mansion was unusually still. Tunde was at the hospital with Zainab, who had finally woken, groggy but alive. Veronica stood in the estate office, copies of the diary pages spread across her desk. She had already sent them to her lawyer and the board chairman. Tomorrow the press conference would happen. Amaka's fake will would be exposed. Everything would crumble. But Veronica knew Amaka wouldn't go down quietly. And she was right. At 2:14 a.m., the eastern wing of the estate went up in flames. The explosion rocked the house. Staff ran screaming. Smoke poured from the rooftop like a black dragon unleashed. Firefighters arrived within minutes. But the damage was done. Amaka's suite and the original diary were completely destroyed. The only remaining proof now lay in Veronica's digital copies. As the fire raged, Veronica stood in her nightgown on the lawn, her face hard as stone, watching everything burn. She knew who did it. She knew why. But she hadn't expected the next move. As the crowd gathered, a voice cried out, "Madame Veronica is behind it. She planted the fire to destroy evidence." Everyone turned. Amaka stood at the edge of the smoke, coughing but camera-ready, holding an untouched copy of the forged will. The press was already there, and suddenly the narrative shifted. She's trying to erase my truth, Amaka said hoarsely, and now she's endangering lives to do it. It was a war of perception now. One woman had the truth. The other had the world's sympathy. And tomorrow, only one of them would still have power. The next morning, every major TV station in Nigeria was live streaming from the Adeniyi estate. Reporters swarmed outside the gates. Hashtags like #Veronica exposed and #Adeniyi scandal trended across social media. Amaka, wrapped in a fake neck brace and crocodile tears, played the victim to perfection. She burned my sweet, she told the cameras. She erased years of history. She wants to bury the truth. Her forged will gleamed under the morning sun like a crown stolen from the dead. And for a moment, it worked. Public opinion flipped. The board called an emergency session. Tunde was overwhelmed. And Veronica? She was silent, barren, until noon. At exactly 12 p.m., the gates opened. Veronica emerged in a deep, wine-colored wrapper, gel-tied like a warrior queen. She stepped to the podium, flanked by her lawyer and a forensic expert. The crowd hushed. Then she dropped the first bombshell, a digital forensic report confirming Amaka's will was signed, while Chief Adeniyi was sedated on morphine illegal and invalid. Cameras clicked, gasps erupted, but she wasn't done. She then played a voice recording retrieved from Amaka's own housekeeper's phone. Amaka's voice filled the air. Burn it, all of it. I want nothing left. If she exposes me, I'll take them down with me, Tunde, Zainab, everything. I don't care anymore. Let them bleed. Dead silence. Veronica turned to the crowd. She poisoned my daughter-in-law. She lied about her marriage. She set my house on fire. This woman isn't a victim, she's a viper. Police arrived moments later. Amaka tried to run. She didn't make it past the gate. As the sirens faded, Tunde and Zainab, now recovered, stepped beside Veronica, each holding her hand. 3 generations, 1 legacy, restored. And Veronica, the lioness, looked into the cameras and said, "Never mistake silence for surrender." The end. What's your take on this explosive sequel? Was Amaka the ultimate villain or just a woman scorned? Should Veronica have gone even further? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Team Veronica or Team Amaka? Want a part 3? Say yes. And let's take this legacy war to the next level. When like, share, and tag someone who loves a good billionaire drama. The game has changed. Are you ready for what comes next?